Hey friends, Adam here. Welcome back to Slow Tech Podcast. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Julia Oliansky and Andrew Dunn of the School of Wise Innovation. The School of Wise Innovation reimagines innovation education in service of shifting culture towards a more beautiful relationship with technology. Amongst other offerings, they are hosting their first ever in-person retreat next month in Mount Shasta, offering a 5-day immersive as an initiation into the culture of wisdom and responsibility. It's called the Embodied Ethics Retreat, and the link in the show notes will offer you more information on this retreat. So without further ado, I give you my conversation with Andrew and Julia of the School of Wise Innovation. Andrew and Julia, I would love to invite you to introduce yourselves. Tell us about the journey of Wise Innovation Project.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, great to be here. And I'm present to the fact that it was about 4 years ago that we recorded an episode. And also Julia and I had done an Instagram Live experiment. I don't know if you remember that during the early pandemic.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we just kind of had a public conversation, which at the time was not something I had done before. But yeah, Julie and I were talking about, like, we have an interesting intertwining journey that leads us to where things are at today, and thought we might go back and forth and try to tell that story.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to start it off, Andrew?
Go for it.
Okay, yeah. Hi, I'm Julia. So Andrew and I first met. It's funny because we're talking about he's talking about him coming up to Mount Shasta next week, or it's really close to where I am here in Ashland now. But I was living in the Bay. Previously, I'd been there for about a decade before I moved up here. But the first time I ever came up to this area was I got a call from this woman, Belinda, who has some land in Weed right next to Mount Shasta called Hestia. And she had found out about my work around the Forest Bathing Club and was like, I feel like the forest is calling you up here. And that's like a very part of how I navigate these times, is like listening to the trees and listening to messages that come through people or through books from the trees. And so I went up to Hestia, and that's where Andrew and I first met. I don't know, Andrew, you can tell your story of how you got to that moment. But yeah, from my work with forest bathing, and previously I have a master's degree in product design and products of design from School of Visual Arts. I've been working in design consultancies, so a lot about like the innovation, the creative process. And I've always felt that what was missing from the creative process is connection to nature, and how people create is missing. And so, there's, especially in those days in like the 2018, there's all these like accelerators, innovation. And I was like, we need like a nature accelerator to accelerate people's connection to nature. And so I ended up prototyping a weekend retreat. It was like 4 or 5 days around this. And Andrew was one of the people who came. And it's really great because one of those things that like in my life went through that, and I thought it went well, but it didn't necessarily lead to anything else at the time. I had a book come out, kind of just like, I didn't really, know where to take it, but this is also part of how I see the creative process, is like these seeds that you plant, kind of like, maybe you thought they're annual and they're perennial and they come up another time, or they like come up in different places. How much of an impact it actually had on Andrew's life, I didn't really realize until we had connected again later on. So yeah, I'll hand it to you, Andrew.
Mhm. Wow. Those are some beautiful initial threads here. Yeah. So my journey has been kind of like, I was a frat bro, tech bro kind of guy, achievement culture. And then, yeah, coming out to the Bay about a decade ago, being introduced to all these different communities and ways of being, and still trying to be a tech entrepreneur, but like with mindfulness and spirituality. And so that kind of led me to some of these places like Mount Shasta and to some of Julia's forest bathing club events. Maybe I'm being too hard on myself. I feel like I had a sincere desire to be creating things in the world in a more beautiful way that would be better for everybody. And what I was working on at the time, Siempo, a mindful smartphone, is actually what connected me to Adam through this digital wellness collective ecosystem of like-minded people who were concerned and wanting to help people with tech addiction and whatnot. So the nature accelerator was really eye-opening for me, because it's like, oh yeah, not only is it digital detox, like putting down your phone and getting out into the negative ions and hugging trees and stuff, but nature is one of our greatest teachers. And it can teach us things like Julia talked about, cycles and like things in their right timing, seeds planting. That's been a big theme recently. I actually just decided not to go on a big trip and instead to rest because when I look at the arc of the year, I haven't really been honoring the rest cycle. So yeah, that retreat in 2018 definitely planted the seeds, such that a few years later in 2023, I did a vision fasting for a few days in nature to mark a threshold. I really wanted to step into a new phase of life, of one of greater maturity and responsibility. And coming down the mountain, I was like, whoa, more people in tech should do this thing. And like, I've had that sense with, meditation retreats or psychedelics, whatever. But I was like, wow, this immersion in nature feels timeless, universal, accessible, legal, and really effective at giving this felt sense of interdependence and really like firsthand direct experience learning from nature and getting clear, coming back to yourself, so many things. So I happened to have arranged to stay with Julia like 2 nights later and was remembering the nature accelerator. I was like, hey, like this seems so obvious. Like, want to do something again?
I love hearing these threads of these stories coming together, because again, it also reminds me, Andrew, of the conversation that we had on my previous podcast, Wabi-sabi, and how at that time we sort of touched on it as, instead of an accelerator, it's a decelerator, and that term is still kind of like rolls around and plays in my head. And the work that I've been doing kind of, basically in solidarity, like in an adjacent manner down here in LA, as a kind of one man act of service to bring tea into the office space, into the organization, like as a mindfulness module, as a team building experience. So quite literally slowing people down through the shared experience of drinking tea. In the Gong Fu style, I'm struck by my experiences of facilitating those experiences over these 8 to 15 years. I'm really curious how you both feel about, to go deeper into this sort of origin story, like why is it, why why should technologists kind of build this bridge between themselves and being immersed in nature? What is it about the inability to recognize them, like they themselves are actually a part of nature? They are nature themselves. Um, yeah, like given the state, the stage of evolution and acceleration that we are at, what is it about technologists and leaders building more personal relationships with nature?
Yeah. There's so many ways to dig into this, but I can start, and we'll weave, I'm sure. But there's, I mean, like what first came to mind is that we create at our own level of consciousness, like where we are in the world is like reflects of what we create. So if nature is one of these, whether it's through a process of a 2-hour forest bath or a week-long vision fast, it does bring us into a level of maturation that isn't necessarily part of our Western culture, to see ourselves as part of larger systems and see how the impact that we have ripples out. And so, without that, like it's almost like there's like a myopic view of what we're creating, or, like we learn, there's like, Andrew, I think that we'll both talk about this, about like technologists, people, we're always like, as you create, you learn from your mistakes and you iterate. And how do we not create so much damage along the way, as a society? And I believe that like being more aware through nature connection, and understanding, our place in the ecology of things is helpful for that. But another part is like, we have, depending on like, there's a worldview in which like humans have been on this journey of disconnection from nature for thousands of years, ever since like, modern agriculture and technology. We keep creating technology to bring us further and further away. But that's also, I'm like, but there is technology in nature, so like, but this like human created technology is bringing us further away. It's almost like we don't want to see these, trying to, make us move away from natural cycles of life and death. And, when really, and then like, look where that's gotten us in terms of where our planet is now.
Yeah, it's like, feels like there's one game right now, and maybe it's always been this game, which is like, how can we live in harmonious, right, sustainable relationship with the web of life? And through scarcity, trauma, competition, things above our pay grade, like certain energies and awarenesses and consciousnesses have proliferated to this moment today, where in tech business culture, it's very much optimize one part at the expense of other parts in the whole. Like no regard necessary really for the other parts in the whole, including one's own body and relationship with their family and their colleagues, let alone the environment or the epistemic commons, or just like these other aspects of the web of life. And a lot of that has to do with like, never learned it. no one taught us. It wasn't part of the industrial schooling. It wasn't part of what our elders wanted to impart on us. It wasn't valued. And I think we're seeing a lot more people becoming aware of this deficiency, distortion, forgetting, and looking for ways to remember and to reorient. And it's hard. It's like, generations of conditioning and entrenched systems. And how do you work to shift that culture? What I've decided is that education is where it's at, and it seems that some of the best education happens in person, in nature, slowly. And so I'm drawn to creating containers for that, and also to be in containers like that myself, because if I want to be in right relationship with life, then I need to continuously connect with life and affirm that relationship and remember it individually, communally, collectively.
I have like multiple questions that are bottlenecking in my head at the moment because there's so much I'd like to share and reflect back to what's being said. But I'm also really curious to know, given what Wise Innovation has been doing thus far, and I know that there's going to be an upcoming retreat, I believe next month, up in Shasta, and I'd love to ask you about that too. What's some of the feedback that you're getting from these leaders, from people who join, who engage, in your programming and in the education?
I can start that one off. So for context, the School of Wise Innovation is this early educational initiative that was started about a year ago, coming out of some of the work I was doing at Center for Humane Technology around education, and also kind of through this podcast called The Emerald, Currents and Trends Through a Mythic Lens, and an AI episode that Josh Rye did that is really remarkable and highly recommend listening to. It was all about what we're talking about and the lack of initiatory experiences and elders and accountability. And we wound up doing a course to go deeper into that episode. That was the school's first course. And then this retreat coming up next month came out of conversations that Julia and I had a year ago after my vision fast, and kind of like a enthusiasm amongst people in the course community and coalescing around the school to gather in real life and practice together. And it seems like the retreat's going through a bit of an evolution from more of an experience that we're offering. Like, it would be awesome to, and we want to work towards creating an ecology of rites of passage experiences for tech leaders that want to initiate themselves into a culture of wisdom and responsibility and nature connection. And we have interest from some tech leaders who fit that bill. But there's been more interest from just people that we've been building relationships with this year, which is a unique year with the election and with AI and with climate. And I don't know, I think maybe that's part of the story of Julia and I reconnecting, like being at a certain place in our lives and careers and having navigated a number of different subcultures and being like, cool, like who's aligned in a set of values and lifestyle and like vision for the world, and kind of like the whole islands of sanity, islands of coherence. What's that quote? Oh no. Help. Anyways, I'll pause there. So yeah, we're kind of orienting to this retreat as like, oh, more of like a gathering for people who are interested in this intersection of tech and wisdom.
Yeah, to build on that, one thing that this is like a phrase that's kind of stuck with us is process is product. So like, it's less about what you create than how you create it. And also what you create has the energy and carries what, like, with the how, like the intentions and how you create it, like determines what you create. And there seems to be, yeah. So like in our creation, it's like there's been a lot of like listening to, what the we're having a like the Headwaters outdoor school, like what does that want to be? What do people want? What does the land want? What are these times asking us for? So it's like, instead of just like having this one, this is how it's going to be, and like not kind of like blind, it's like, no, we're really paying attention, which is like emergence. And it's also like there can be a little bit of discomfort in that, because you're kind of like riding this edge of uncertainty. But that is like, that is the more like trusting that creative edge is like where we are meant, how that's what it looks like to be creating with nature in real time. But then also the people that, and Andrew is like a masterful weaver of networks and people who all, have these aligned and, adjacent, and things are working towards. And like, actually, maybe it's like more about getting these people in space together to see what emerges, and to, whatever school-wide innovation, like how it's creating, like go through these processes in nature in real time, as opposed to just like doing it, on Zoom calls or, on WhatsApp, which are useful tools, but like having that deep time in nature, doing the work ourselves, basically.
Mm-hmm.
There's something that was said. I don't remember exactly which one of you just said it, but it kind of reverberated this this concept I've heard recently from a futurist named Monica Bielskit, and they were sharing how it seems as though a lot of what's been motivating, acceleration these days is, it's almost as though dystopia has become the product roadmap. And so I wonder, with that as a observation of what's been going on these days, especially Andrew, as you say, in particular this year, the significance of this year, the way that things have shifted and changed at the drop of a dime, with a tweet or something. I wonder how that may be inspiring people to, again, to engage with school-wise innovation. And I'd love to hear more about the specifics of what's going to be happening in the retreat next month.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's early September, the retreat is slated for, and there's something about those dates that have struck me. It's like the Friday after Labor Day, so many people might just be coming back from vacation and diving right back into the swing of fall, which I find is the busiest season. And so the busiest season in what might be one of the most intense seasons in our lifetimes, like how do you start that off on a good note? Like, I don't think we have rituals and guidance for how to do that. And I'm not saying we're the experts, but Julia's done a lot of guiding. Leslie Freeman, one of our other co-facilitators, has done a lot of guiding, and Tim Corcoran, who started Headwaters, is an amazing elder who's one of the most nature-loving people out there. And we are imagining a good balance of structured activities with like emergent spaciousness, do your own thing, punctuated by some experiences that we think are good to practice together. Like a fire tending workshop. There's been a lot of chatter about like fire being this original technology that can teach us so much. It's dual use, and that it can warm your bones and heat food, but it can also burn the village down. It's like, how do you build a good fire and contain it? And then community sweat lodge, overnight solo fast, and all these things are optional, but envisioning like really good rest, nourishment, in addition to learning and practicing and deepening relationships and visioning together. And these are people from a variety of different backgrounds. I was just talking to someone who is a therapist. I was just talking to somebody who's starting a mental health company. There are people who are identifying as chief philosophy officers and consultants in wise innovation. And it's a motley crew that's been leaning in, but all drawn by this interest in the intersection of tech and wisdom for reals. Mm-hmm. And I think a personal commitment to growth, because there's a lot of noise out there in like the spiritual circus and tech awakening scene. And I think that's one thing that Julia and I have bonded over, is kind of like dipping into that and like not really resonating with that, and trying to find our relationship with like, the West Coast beauty and shadow.
Just to like add on to what Andrew was saying, I feel like one of the reasons how I got to Ashland, Oregon is like I was feeling in the Bay Area like so ungrounded, like just there's so much stuff, and like it's exciting and you can ride these waves and you can meet all these people and it's like so expansive, but I was like completely would like lose my center. And that's actually, I think, why forest bathing is such a needed, nature connection is so needed for that. But what's funny is like in some ways I almost like shot myself in the foot because I moved to Southern Oregon, which is way grounded, but the people are way more grounded, and so like this idea of nature connection, forest bathing work doesn't like translate necessarily to here. So I actually had to like go, and I was working remote doing like strategy design consulting. And then I've noticed a shift in my life this year, but I think it's part of a larger pattern I'm seeing with a lot of people is like the work I've been doing ended, the opportunity felt like basically, my company laid off half the company. And that's just a lot of like with AI, there's a lot of this stuff going on. And for me, it's been like an invitation, a push to like go do like this work that you're really meant to be doing, or like how do we work now has been these questions. And I think there's a lot of people who are feeling that. So like not only are there shifts, like I'm like, there's what, I'm not an astrologer, but there seems like there's something like in our evolution that's going on. But then also we talk about like what this retreat, will be happening. And we, one of the technologies that, is in the earth, is in many, if not all traditional cultures, is this idea of the wheel of the year and different season, based on like different seasons having different being for different things. If you think about just like on very agricultural level, if you think on like a energetic level, and this is also part of my philosophy. And I don't know, I'm not so far as to say the school by innovation philosophy, but I think there's in there too around using wheel of the year, like, wheels, cycles as part of this, what is the process of innovation. And so living that in the retreat and like sharing about that is also a big part of it.
Mm-hmm. I just want to add on there. One of the things I really want to put more energy into is reimagining the innovation process, like from bringing an idea or a vision from just like consciousness into form in the world, like how to do that in a good way for all involved. And especially at the earliest stage when like every conversation can have such an outsized influence on what unfolds. It's like you're watering the seed. Like, how are you tending to the seed or the baby? You know, there's a lot of metaphors here that are apt. And I think what Julia is saying about the cycle is there's something really important there. Like, and it very well might be dependent on the local ecology of the bioregion that one is in. You know, the seasons here are different from Australia or New York City, but like what activities are going to be of highest service at what time of year for the thing that you're creating, which is also creating you in some ways. It's a relationship. What is right relationship with this energy that you are stewarding at different times of day, week, moon, sun, and life cycle? And with modern culture, it's kind of just like all systems go linear forever. There's not death built in. There's not rest built in. There's not time to integrate lessons. So yeah, what's an alternative way? And maybe it's not really possible, or maybe it's really hard. But I think it's worth naming, articulating, and trying, because I think we need good role models, good examples to set.
Absolutely. I mean, even from the wheel, from the wheel, the visual, as you described the wheel, and of course, like down here in LA, we have like a different cadence to the year as well. Like there's different seasons here as well. But even from a tea perspective, like having been a student of Chinese tea culture, there are certain teas that we can drink at certain times of day. There are certain teas from a TCM perspective at certain times of year. Like right now in the hotter months, we drink like raw pu'er tea because it's a bit more astringent and bitter, and it helps cool the body down, by sweating and tonifying the liver. And then in the colder, dreary, grayer months, we drink like ripe pu'er tea, which is like radiates warmth outward. And so acknowledging that there's dynamism there, there's versatility there, that there's access. I think for a lot of people, it seems as though there's nothing else but what's kind of coming at you from a fire hose perspective. I mean, if we can acknowledge that still to this day, for the most part, tech is in service of capital. Period. End of sentence. But what happens when people start to reinterpret that on a smaller and then maybe growing, at bigger levels, that tech can be in service of growth, of collaboration, of connectivity. It's almost as though we take storytelling and narratives like, the Star Trek sort of mythos of, well, at some point in the future, maybe tech can be in service of collaborating in really large numbers and developing ourselves and developing each other. And so I'm curious also, I love that just the term forest bathing has been peppered throughout this conversation. And it makes me realize that, in Japanese culture, there is a term for forest bathing. It's called Shinrin-yoku. And it's almost something that is prescribed as a healing modality, so that it is taken seriously in the culture. So I wonder, again, given the time that we have in this conversation, I'd love to learn more about how your own spiritual traditions, ancestral traditions, also come into this work that you're doing as School of Wise Innovation.
I can start. Sure. Yeah. I love that you're hip to Shinrin-yoku, and I will definitely dig more into that. But I would say like my, ancestry story is grew up on the East Coast, Ashkenazi Jewish, but both sides, in a very, went to a Reform synagogue. My high school, I think, was like public high school was like 50% Jewish. So it was always a part of my upbringing, but never like, there wasn't like the spiritual element wasn't expressed for me. I didn't feel that. And I actually was diagnosed with Lyme disease as a teenager, and through my healing journey of that, I ended up getting more into different alternative healing and spiritual healing modalities, and kind of explored everything. Finally found nature connection as my own healing, connecting to nature, and that's where that was like, to me, spirit, like where my spirituality, like that was the core of it. And then I started to study other cultures that had nature connection at its core, and spent time with Mayan elders in Guatemala, with Buddhist Shugendu Buddhist monks in Japan, with Maori in New Zealand. Then I found different teachers. Lindsay Roberts has this whole shamanic Reiki, and I spent time with her in the Hoh Rainforest. I eventually found earth-based Judaism, which was really healing to me, to find my own culture had this connection to nature, and actually it's core to Judaism, but something that's been lost for various reasons, over time. But yeah, that's definitely been what's informed my work. And it's this balance, I would say, of finding it in my own ancestry and tradition and practices. And, like talking about this Wheel of the Year, there's a Jewish Wheel of the Year that I've studied and has been really helpful for me. And I think I had a friend who once said, you have to go through your roots to bear the fruits. So, going through your own ancestry, own tradition, going there, even though you dig deep enough into the, the roots, and you see like all these traditions have a lot of connection and overlap, but going through your own one is how you get there.
Mm-hmm.
Humbling. Yeah.
Wow. Ditto for like the first half of my life, like East Coast Reform, Judaism, stuff like that. And yeah, like a whole mix of things in my like seeking 20s, and then like wondering about, oh yeah, what's my culture got to offer, and who were my ancestors, and what happened to their culture. And that's been a really meaningful journey the last few years. And just in this moment, it occurs to me like, yeah, Jews are the people of the book, and so there's like a reading thing there, and I do a lot of writing, and I think it's the main creative medium through which I express my heart and soul into the world. And so I don't know how much that has to do with like 80 to whoever knows how many generations of people like reading and writing. But I wonder if there's also something about, like Julia mentioned, there was like Judaism was a place-based tradition, and then through expulsion, it became a wandering tradition. I don't know. I feel like there's a better adjective there, and had to adapt, had to innovate. And so a lot of the holidays and rituals and symbol, like there's a lot in the tradition that it survived because it adapted. And I think we need a lot of innovation right now to adapt. But I don't believe that all that innovation will necessarily be software or hardware or tech. It might be about remembering and adapting a lot of these ancient and traditional ways of being with ourselves and each other and the living earth.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Julia and I sometimes talk about like how we can draw inspiration from the deep well of ethics and wisdom in our own tradition and like translate it and apply it to what we're creating or how we want to support other people and how they are creating. And I suppose we're already doing it through things like the calendar and just like shared understanding about, oh yeah, this is the mourning period that we're in right now, this 3-week period. So how's that influence what we do and what we don't do and the vibes?
Mm-hmm.
I might title this particular episode "Three Jews in One Podcast," but I'm half Ashkenazi and Sephardic, and my birthday every year always falls somewhere in the realm of like Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and so sometimes the tone of my birthday might be a little more somber, and other times it's way more festive and outgoing. But I love hearing that notion of it's a kind of it's an adept way of picking up traditions and adapting over time via diaspora and expulsion, and obviously also cataclysmic experiences too. That's beautiful. I mean, as I'm hearing all this, I'm really excited, slightly envious about this upcoming retreat, and I'd love to follow up, like in bookmarking this conversation. I know Julia, you have to hop off for the next 1 or 2 minutes, and I'm just really excited to hear the evolution and the progress of what's going on, and to be able to also sync up at some point in the future in person, and maybe even offer tea as one of the modules, and one of these upcoming experiences and retreats.
Mm-hmm.
Because because it feels like it's time. I feel like a lot more people are recognizing it's time to do things a little bit differently, and whether that comes through upheaval type experiences, I'm almost hoping that in one sense, if there's any silver lining to automating certain parts of our lives, like say work or something, that I hope that does open up an invitation to like do a lot more self-inquiry and have more time to actually, spend more quality time with each other. Again, that's the utopian, that's the parent in me, the optimist, the cautious optimist. So how can more people get involved as we begin to wrap up this conversation?
Beautiful. Well, website is wiseinnovation.school. We've got the Substack, we've got a Discord server, and you can see the course that we did in the spring and more details about this upcoming retreat and more details about just like where things seem to be going to reimagine innovation education, which will require educators and facilitators and research and all these things. So yeah, that's the main way. And my website is andrewmurraydunn.com.
Yeah, I want to say first, like, this conversation has been so deep and rich, and then I'm like, it feels like it's not even like how we've had time for all of this, and I feel like the slow tech. There's like something in like this, like it's been slowed, but really, like it's felt slow and deep, but like it got all there. So I think like what you're creating also has a lot of power. So thank you, yeah, so much for doing this and for having us on here, and yeah, I'd say all the ways that Andrew stay in touch, to get involved. And then, personally also have a website, needs updating, but juliaoliansky.com. Similarly, Substack and all the Instagram, all that stuff. But yeah, spend more time with my daughter and in nature than on those things. But it's always amazing when technology does allow us to connect with, like-minded and, people who are doing cool things in the world.
Yeah, the silver lining, there it is, in the here and now. Thank you so much. Again, I look forward to bookmarking this conversation and following up after the retreat, in the very near future, maybe when the world changes again come November. So thank you.